found out 2 days ago, Geraldo's producer admitted to me that Steve Pence put the entire thing together. I mean, and for Mr. Pence's information, I recorded that because I'm not going to let them get away with this.
And Steve Pence, just to remind everybody, is Rick Pitino's attorney.
Yes. And Karen was in the hospital that day that the Geraldo interview took place. Basically what happened was Geraldo's people called me in Vegas and said, well, if Karen's not at the studio, we're going to just go forward and let Pence say what he wants to say. And Dave Nolan made the decision. He was already in New York, so they went ahead and went forward with it. And Pence basically got on there and said that Karen was only doing this to commit or to get revenge against Pitino. What she's accused of is this. As we know from what we've told you, she's been raped twice by Rick Pitino. She went forward and filed charges, or tried to file charges, with the Commonwealth Attorney in Louisville, which Stengel, I guess is his name, which was kind of a joke at that point because the FBI was already deeply immersed and deeply controlling the entire matter. They claimed, the government claimed that that was Karen's retaliation against a witness in a federal investigation. That was one of the charges. The other ones were that she caused Lester Getzinger, not Leo, that's from a movie, Lester Getzinger to make 3 phone calls to Pitino, and each one of those was a separate act of threatening to injure a party by defaming his reputation. Well, the fact is we now know by forensics that it was more than one person, and Getzinger didn't make the calls. And by the way, had we had a hearing, Peter, if the judge wouldn't have tried to shut us down and we had a hearing, here's what he would have heard. We had witnesses that Getzinger was out telling that he only said that he made those calls simply because it was the only way the government was going to agree to charge him and then drop the charges afterwards, which is exactly what they did. They gave him something called an Alford plea or diversion, which is unheard of in the federal system, but basically after a year passed, all charges were dropped and he has no conviction or otherwise. Then she was charged with, the government pounded on Karen about, actually in this forensic, or not forensic, but this polygraph, the government took a polygraph and tried to get Karen to say that she actually did have a sexual relationship with Coulter, and she kept saying it was strictly business. Well, they convicted her by showing these pornographic pictures to the jury. And I got to tell you, anybody that could sit here and in good conscience believe that a jury could be shown pictures of a woman performing oral sex on their lawyer and believe she was innocent of anything, they're kidding themselves. And it so highly prejudiced the outcome of the trial, it was over at that point, even though those photographs were bogus. Those photographs weren't of Karen. There were 2 of them that were clear, or 3 of them that were clearly Karen, and then there was the, as they want to call it in the dirty industry, the money shot. And it was disgusting. And when you look at it, just a few minutes of looking at the picture, you realize it's not her. I do want to clear up one thing that Darlene touched on about this IRS thing. That IRS raid took place not only on U.S. Justice Watch's office, but the offices are above my barn at my home. My 9-year-old answered the door, and they grabbed her and ran her out the back door and told her, don't worry, we're here to get your mom and dad. We were upstairs sick in the bed. The IRS was there because I'm after 2 state police, well, 1 state police officer and a city police officer who we believe, have substantial reason to believe, are involved in the drug industry. Well, we also know that those same 2 officers are working with the federal government because during the raid, they showed up with the IRS. They were forced to leave immediately thereafter. And when I was at the IRS's office getting some of my things back the other day, I found items that were stolen from my home in 2008. And I think me telling this right now is the first revelation the government knows of that. But believe me, they're going to know soon because we're getting ready to file complaints.
Let me ask you this. Were any witnesses called on Karen's behalf at the trial? Not
a single one, and there were 19 of them ready to go.
How does that happen?
Well, actually, if you went through the events in the case, Earhart told Karen she had no choice in anything she did. It was all up to him. And if anybody's ever been through a trial, they realize until after the trial, you haven't a clue what happened. It's like a fog, you're a deer in the headlights. Earhart, when the government rested its case, Earhart took all the witnesses, told them what order they were going to testify in, and what they were going to testify about. Put Karen in his car, drove back to his office, and told him he had this great idea that he was going to catch the government off guard by not calling any witnesses and they wouldn't have a clue on how to do their closing argument. Well, number one, that's the most idiotic thing I ever heard, because the judge would have given them a week to prepare their closing statements if they would have asked for it. So who are we trying to kid? But the second thing that happened was Earhart convinced Karen that he wasn't sure that's what he was going to do. Let's talk, just wait until overnight. Don't tell anybody about it. We'll decide it in the morning. They show up at court in the morning. Earhart, unbeknownst to Karen, walked in and said, the defense rests. Well, the 19 witnesses were all but hysterical, because he had walked into the witness room and told them, I'm not going to call you, and then went in and performed that little event. But the most disturbing part of all that is the judge has adopted that argument as valid. All you have to do is go online, Google the news, and you can hear from one of the jurors how stupid the argument was. And I don't usually call somebody stupid, but what Earhart did was either incredibly moronic or it was a brilliant plan on how to get his client convicted. The juror got up in front of the news and said, look, we made the decision on the evidence that was in at trial. When Earhart started making his closing arguments, we had no clue what he was talking about, because nothing he said was in any of the evidence. And the judge said we had to decide it on what was in the evidence. Even the jury smelled a rat, but they're sitting in that jury room going, well, what do we do?
Here's something else, too. By Earhart, okay, 5 minutes, by Earhart not cross-examining as he should have, I mean, any 12-year-old kid watching one episode of Perry Mason would know, if you read the transcripts of this trial, you would know he should be objecting. He should be objecting. Why isn't he using this evidence? Boxes of evidence. He's not cross-examining. Well, that was pretty clever, too, because then they don't preserve it for an appeal. In federal court, if you don't object to what someone's saying, if you don't present that evidence, you don't reserve that issue on an appeal. So now she doesn't have any appeal, thanks to Earhart. So you either choose to believe that Jim Earhart, her court-appointed attorney, was either the dumbest attorney walking the earth, in which case he needs to not ever represent anybody ever again, or he's the shoeless Joe Jackson of the legal system. He was playing ball for the other side, which is exactly what we're claiming, and we have the evidence to back it up. We only have a few more minutes left, and at this time, I want Karen, we're going to let her read a prepared statement here.
She was involved in the preparation. This is her words.
These are her words.
Thank you. Approximately 80% of all rapes in this country go unreported. What has happened to me is a clear indication as to why. I, like many other women, was a rape victim who was too embarrassed to report the rape initially. Because the person who raped me was a wealthy, high-profile, well-connected person, I just thought that no one would believe me. I became pregnant as a result of this rape. I was threatened that if I did not have an abortion, that something terrible would happen to me and my family. I feared for my children's lives and my own. I went along with this horrible mistake that has haunted me to this day. I finally couldn't take it anymore. I had to tell someone, and I shared this with my attorney, Dana Coulter. At the stern direction of my then attorney, Dana Coulter, I tried to report it to the Louisville Metro Police Department. The events that took place after that are well documented, as we've heard. Basically, I was brought up on trumped up charges in order to shut me up. When I refused to be silenced, I was then railroaded in a nightmare trial where none, absolutely none, of my evidence and of my 19 witnesses were called, none of them to testify, as well as myself. The jury only heard one side of the story, as was orchestrated by hand-picked trial attorney James Earhart and the court. I would have more rights in Afghanistan. If what has happened to me is allowed to stand, then it will certainly happen to others. Maybe even you.
It's hard to really say much of anything after hearing that, but let me ask your attorneys, because I think we know how you feel at the idea that you're going to be sentenced on Friday. If you want to say something about that, what you're feeling inside as you're looking at what's coming down the road at the end of this week. Just briefly tell us what you feel inside.
Well, obviously, when you're not in my shoes, and all of this evidence, and not one piece of evidence has been able to be shown and allowed to be shown. I cannot justify that. And I stand very strong to that. And all of my evidence that I do have, that I need to share, and I want to share, and I wanted to share.
Okay. In the minute or two that we have left, I just want to ask Jim and Darlene, what do you hope the ultimate result is going to come about by your defending this case? I mean, including what you hope will happen for Karen, but also for others. Where are you going with this?
Well, obviously we want Karen to be exonerated, and I think that eventually will take place. I mean, the system's terribly broken, but a lot of it is just staying power. In this case, she's going to have plenty of that. There's a lot of us. There's a whole lot more behind the 7 of us. But when you asked early on about U.S. Justice Watch, when Darlene and I became friends, we had a common goal in mind, and that's to try to restart the word justice and the true meaning of it. And Darlene is somebody with enormous tenacity, and I think I have it myself. And the goal of this is to use Karen's example of how bad the justice system can be, because people don't pay attention to the everyday case. I mean, every single day we got people being released out of prison that are innocent. The United States is 5% of the world's population, yet we house 25% of the world's prisoners. Somebody's got to pay attention, man. The system's broken. This isn't law. This is just anarchy in a different fashion, in a room where we put these nice oak panels up. It doesn't make it any better when you put just a nice coating on it. I mean, Darlene, if you've got anything to add to that.
I just want to send a message to the government. A lot of these people back here behind us, and there's several organizations here backing Karen, we're not going away. We're not going away. And we're going to pursue this. We will take this all the way to the Supreme Court if we have, the U.S. Supreme Court if we have to. We're not going to let Karen down. And the individuals who perpetrated this, the individuals within the government, we're going to make darn sure that this, not only is she exonerated, but we're not going to stop there. We're going to make sure that the people who forged these documents, these FBI agents, where's that investigation? We sent a letter, and they did less than 3 days. They did a full investigation according to headquarters of the FBI. Really? 3 days to fully investigate this? And we have these documents here, too. I don't think so. No one's looking at this. Nobody's watching the watchers. That's what we're here to do. So now I'm going to get back into my role as Truth or Politics. Thank you, Peter, for being our guest. We're out of time here. We hope you guys really take a hard look at this show. Please join us again on Truth or Politics next week. Same bat channel, same bat time. And thank you for joining us. So how about a round of applause for the people who at the back, everybody that showed up And most importantly, pick the phone, call who?
Call your congressman.
Yeah, pick up the phone and call your congressman and tell them that you're not going to put up with this. And how about a round of applause for a woman who's withstood everything that she should never have to withstand? Let's show a little support.